所以这个疫情过去的时候，我希望我可以来台湾跟你在一起，我们可能可以看我同学的同学们，我们也许可以请他们都在一起，一定是很重要的一个时间，我也期待我们都在一起。
Hello everybody, I hope you're having an amazing day. My name is Wes Davies, and this week's episode is another interview with my Uncle Gordon, but this time I go through his Mandarin learning experience over the past 4 decades, and I ask him if there's any tips or tricks that he has for me as I try to improve my Mandarin language abilities as well. So I hope you like this video. It's really awesome to talk to my Uncle Gordon once again. So here is that interview. Hey again, Gordon, how are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you, Wes?
I'm doing great. We chatted last week. That was a really nice interview. So thank you for taking the time to talk with me again.
You're welcome anytime.
So this week, I'm living in Taiwan. It's been, believe it or not, over 3 years. But I really do want to improve my Chinese, my Mandarin. It's okay. I can go to the restaurant. I can order my meals. I can order train tickets. I can follow directions, but when it really comes down to kind of the nitty-gritty conversation, when things get a little more complicated, or if I'm trying to express myself a little bit more freely, that's when I start to struggle a little bit. So I was hoping to chat with you today, talk about your Mandarin learning journey, and hopefully I can come away with maybe some advice that would help me in my future.
Right. Well, my journey is long and only somewhat successful. I don't think I speak Mandarin very well at all. I took it at a young age as a hobby, and then I took it at university. But I went to university in the early 70s when nobody could go to mainland China to study Chinese. So we took Chinese as a dead language.
Oh.
We didn't learn to speak it, we learned to read it only. Then I came to Taiwan, and for the first time, I had to actually speak Mandarin. And I never really got very good at it. I was teaching in Mandarin, actually. So I learned the words for noun and verb and adjective and test and exam and results and so on. But I never got really good at conversation. Then that was for a year and a half at Viator High School in Taichung, as we've talked about. And I came back to Canada and took different graduate studies and left Chinese behind for many decades, 3 decades. About 2015, I thought I'd go back to it again as a hobby. I'd keep my brain active and see if I could finally make progress in this difficult language. So back to Taiwan, I went to Furen University, and I took a month intensive course, and I've been studying at a private school here in Toronto ever since. And I'm still no good at it.
But that's pretty impressive, though, that when you went to Taichung initially at Viator High School, you were actually teaching in Mandarin.
Yeah, I mean, but you get the basic vocabulary, the words I mentioned, and it was their second year of English only. It was true art. So they were young, they were 12, 13 years old. It was their second year of English. The sentences they were learning in English were not hard, so I could say them in Chinese.
I see.
The boy is going to school. The boy will go to school tomorrow. What still is beyond me is really complex sentences about emotions and beyond daily situation.
Like politics, things like that.
Politics, things like that. The vocabulary is so foreign to English speakers, and it's so easy to forget.
Yeah.
I've studied other languages, and there's something to hook onto based on English or Latin or another language in the European families. In Chinese, there's nothing. So it can just go from the memory like sand. It's so frustrating. I lived in Taiwan and I used the words all the time. They would stick, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But here I am in Toronto having, an hour and a half a week and then just studying on my own. Yeah.
I think just about one of the only words that I can find a similarity to between English and Mandarin is the word mango.
And a martini is martini.
Ah, yes.
That's that, yeah.
And whiskey is whisapi.
Oh, really? Okay. But, so it's the vocabulary is foreign. The words are 2 syllables or 2.5, as you know, because Chinese individual words are only 1 syllable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're always combining 2 1-syllable words. And what constantly catches me up is trying to remember even the order in which they are. For example, the other day I was reviewing the word for technology, right, which is 科技, but it could be 技科. Why not? To an English speaker, why not reverse it? Whereas somebody studying English would learn the word technology, they would never think of saying ology tech, reversing it, right?
Right.
But in Chinese, it just seems so arbitrary. The tones are arbitrary. There's no way of knowing what the tone of a word is when you begin to study it. In French and other languages, you can often guess if it's masculine or feminine. They're tips. Nothing in Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
So not only have to learn how to say the tones, ma, 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 but you have to remember which tone relates to each word. Not only when you're studying it, but when you're speaking really quickly and you're stringing them all together.
Someone once told me if you speak quickly enough in Mandarin, you don't really need to worry about the tones as much.
Ask a native Mandarin speaker that. Certainly, I've had classmates who had really advanced vocabulary, and they didn't speak without any tones at all. 他们说中文的时候不用四声, and it was really hard, even for me to understand.
And one of the things I find the most frustrating is I think my listening and my speaking is certainly much better than my reading. So I'll look at a menu, and some of the dishes I'll have absolutely no idea what it is. But if the waiter comes over and I ask them to read it for me, I'll know what it is.
Okay.
So it's just frustrating that I can't actually phonetically sound it out if I don't know the characters.
Right. Characters are another whole issue. I really love characters,
yeah,
and I try to learn them, again, because it's good for my memory, and I want to be able to read. I mean, I'm never going to live in Taiwan like you. So my goal is actually to learn to read novels in Chinese, which means, obviously, knowing characters. So I work away at them, and actually there are tips for remembering characters. You don't have to memorize them cold. Characters break down into components.
Yeah, the radicals.
Radical and other components. There are only so many hundred of those components. And what I do is break a character down into its components, and then I make up a story with those components. So you were talking about menus. So the character for chicken has a hand grasping, silk, and a short-tailed bird. Those are 3 components for chicken in the full-form characters that they use in Taiwan.
For G.
So I picture somebody with a long sleeve, silk sleeve, grabbing a chicken.
Wow.
So grab, silk, short-tailed bird. And there's also very often in a Chinese character, one of the components, usually not the radical, is an indication of the pronunciation. So in the case of chicken, it's the component for silk, which is s, and s is a indication of the pronunciation G. They're both spelt with an I in romanization. And s and ji are in the same phonetic range in Mandarin. So it's not complex to describe, but when you see it on paper and you get used to it, it becomes really useful. So it means my mind is full of all these silly stories of people chasing chickens and climbing trees, and so, but it works. It works.
It really is like a picture language in a way, the written Mandarin.
Yes and no. I mean, it's not ideograms only. There are a few ideograms, like the character for sun, right, looks like the sun.
And mountain.
For moon looks like a moon. But most, in fact, are not ideograms. They're phono-semantic. So they have one part, the radical, that relates to the meaning, the semantic, and one part that sometimes relates vaguely or closely to the pronunciation.
So there are clues in there if you really look for them.
There are. So take guo, which is land, as 中国.
Country, yeah.
Yeah, so it's got an enclosure, which is the box that the character is in, which relates to the borders of a country. The inner part is pronounced huo, and that gives you guo. That's the phonetic portion. So you figure it out like that.
Yeah.
And often I find native speakers of Chinese, whatever dialect, have forgotten this because they know the characters so well. Just as we don't need to think about the spelling of English words.
Right.
We just know it, So it's language learners who often analyze characters more obviously than native Chinese speakers who know the characters so well they write them automatically.
Before we get to the second half of the interview, I just wanted to let you guys know that I recently launched my Patreon page. So this is a great opportunity if you would like to support me in a little bit more of a substantial way than perhaps just watching my videos on YouTube, which of course I'm extremely grateful that you are willing to watch my videos week after week. But if you go over to my Patreon page, you will see that I have tons of benefits if you do decide to become a member. All kinds of live question and answer videos that I will post there. You can ask me anything. You can leave comments or suggestions for my YouTube channel, and I will be going through all of my old Canada videos and adding newly created Mandarin subtitles, all for your enjoyment. So I really hope you will go check out my Patreon page and consider becoming a member. Of course, it's not obligatory. I am so happy that you are even choosing to watch my videos on YouTube. So please go check it out. I will link the Patreon right down below. And without further ado, let's get back to that interview. Certain characters I find do really look like the word that they're describing, like shui, water. It kind of looks like little drops of water. Huo, the fire, sort of looks like a bonfire coming up.
And even really elaborate ones like long, which is dragon, which is a really fun character. Looks
like the big dragon neck, right?
On its feet. Yeah, exactly.
It does.
But they don't all go like that. If you think they're all going to look like the word they're indicating, you'll get lost.
Right.
Some of them do, but most of them don't. But they are actually a brilliant way of getting around the fact that Chinese is monosyllabic. Like if they had an alphabet, if they had developed that instead of characters, how would they ever distinguish among the hundreds of meanings of, say, ji, 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 ji? There are hundreds of meanings attached to that sound over 4 characters. How would they ever have communicated? Because the language is made up of these 1 syllables, sometimes combined into 2 syllables. So to have characters is actually a brilliant way to handle the limitations of the spoken form that, as I say, is monosyllabic or 2 syllables. Even K-E-J-I. Ke-ji, a Mandarin speaker would be able to think of, 4, 5, or 6 meanings of K-E-J-I.
Sure. And what I really like about it too is, because they use Mandarin characters in Japan, and also in Cantonese they use the same characters. All the different dialects throughout China and Taiwan, Taiwanese, and yet they could all still read the same document and get a relative good idea of what it means.
And that's what's preserved the unity of China over the centuries. If they had not had characters, they would have broken up into totally different languages, and probably the states would have broken up and they would not be unified.
So you think perhaps the language itself, and more specifically the written characters, actually helped to preserve the overall Chinese nation?
Create the unity of the nation, yeah. It meant that the emperor could send out instructions, and everyone, all the magistrates, all the bureaucrats, would be able to read it everywhere in China.
That's fascinating.
So it's worth it to put time in to learn characters, I think.
How often are you studying these days?
An hour and a half a week.
Okay.
And then I sort of play around on my own. I've got a software system called Wenlin where I can make notes and so on. So I play, I don't say I play, I mean, I use it as a hobby. I try to keep my brain active with it. Certainly in COVID, it helps pass the time. I would say maybe 5 hours a week.
That's great.
That's probably not enough to make serious progress, but I'm working and I have other stuff to do, so it's what I'm able to spend.
So any quick tips for me as I try to learn more Mandarin?
Yes, take advantage of being in Taiwan.
Sure.
To get out there and speak. You have it right outside your front door. So throw yourself into it. As every teacher says, don't be afraid of making mistakes. You know how kind and polite the Taiwanese are.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's going to make fun of your mistakes, and they'll help you. They'll be flattered that you're making the effort, and also realize that you're still young enough that it will sink in a permanent way. It's harder when you're older, like me.
Let's hope that's still true for me. I'm getting older every day.
You're a kid.
All right, well, that's great, Gordon. And one other thing, I remember growing up, we were all so impressed with you because legend had it that you could speak many languages. Throughout your life, which ones have you focused on, and which ones would you say at one point you were actually proficient in?
Well, I have studied many languages. I needed it for my graduate work, and I'm the head of languages at a school of continuing studies here in Toronto, University of Toronto. So I've 5 would be the quick answer, to various levels of fluency. So the other thing I'm doing in our COVID isolation is working on French.
Okay.
So I'm reading French novels and watching French movies. I'm learning all the latest slang and, you know, because I'm watching French TV, all the latest ways to swear at people.
Of course. So that's English, Mandarin, French.
German, Italian.
Okay.
I took Latin all through school, and then modern Hebrew I've sort of forgotten. Biblical Hebrew I still know. It's fun and it's good brain exercise.
Yeah.
And I think it would really enrich your life in Taiwan. It would give you this comfort with your friends and your life in Taiwan and your ability to connect with people in a way that you just can't when you're speaking in a foreign language to them.
My friends here who really have dived deep into their Mandarin studies, they say that once you become, almost fluent in it, it really changes your whole life here in Taiwan.
I would certainly believe that, yeah. So it's worth the effort.
All right, well, thank you so much, Gordon. I've got a lot to think about here. I've got my Chinese books over there that I need to crack open a little bit more often, I think.
I have mine right here, so
perfect.
We'll study and then we'll give each other tests.
That's
How's
right.
that?
Next time I come home to Canada, hopefully in the spring, we'll do a little Mandarin testing back and forth. That would be fun.
Very good. I look forward to it.
All right, thanks, Gordon. You take care.
Very good. Bye now.
Talk to you soon. So that is the interview with my Uncle Gordon. It was so fascinating to hear his opinion on what it's like to learn Mandarin Chinese. And of course, I think I took away some great tips and tricks from his language learning experience. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please press that like button. Make sure to subscribe to my channel. Go check out my Patreon page. I really think you guys are going to enjoy the extra content that I post over there. And as always, I will see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.